There are 5 markers that predict when an avoidant is going to shut down before they actually do it. And it's not when you get too close, and it's not when you ask for more. It actually happens way before that. In front of me are 5 tarot cards. Each card reveals a hidden signal that the shutdown is coming. Let's flip over the first one. Card 1 is the sun card. But this isn't like any normal sun. It's dim and full of shadows, almost like the light's about to fade. I designed it this way because with avoidance, usually when the relationship feels the brightest and warmest, it can secretly mark the beginning of the end. Have you ever heard of the 4 seasons theory? It argues that every relationship with an avoidant has 4 distinct seasons. Spring is the honeymoon phase, when everything is fresh and exciting. Summer is what I call the false stability phase. The days are long and the connection feels secure, and you start to believe that it really might last. But for an avoidant, summer is when the seeds of shutdown are quietly planted. That's when our sun tarot card comes into play. Because to you, summer feels like pure light. Everything's warm, but to an avoidant, that same brightness can feel blinding, which of course gives way to autumn. I call this the slow unravel. Subtle distance creeps in and conversations feel a little colder. And then finally you have winter. This is the point where they leave. So really, the greatest predictor an avoidant is going to shut down is when things are looking their best. What does that actually look like? You've hit a stride, your routines feel effortless, jokes are flowing, intimacy is easy, and they seem fully present. You feel like you can finally exhale. For you, comfort equals stability. For many avoidants, comfort equals vulnerability exposure. When they realize that they let their guard down, that you have full access to them emotionally, a reflex kicks in to rebalance the scales towards distance. I'm not even sure this is a conscious choice. I'm sure if you ask them at the moment, they may genuinely feel good. They'd probably even say that they're very happy. But later, the internal alarm starts ringing, and they'll start thinking, this is too close. Too easy and too much. Here are the behavior signs you're going to want to watch out for. Shortly after a high point, they throw in a test. This is going to be some form of minor withdrawal, like a delay in response. They may suddenly change plans, go silent for a day, or bring up a topic that creates a little friction. This is the recalibration move designed to restore emotional space. And that leads us to the second card. Card 2, the fog. All that's pictured here is the fog. There's not really more to it than that. The fog is actually not the important part to talk about here. Rather, it's the time horizon collapse. Every relationship has what I'd like to call a time horizon. Think of it like a mental stretch on the road that both people can see ahead. Put simply, it's the length of time they feel comfortable imagining the relationship continuing. For some, that horizon might be years down the line. They'll plan out vacations and talk about the big milestones and talk about the future. For others, let's just say it's a lot less than years. The point is that when an avoidance time horizon collapses, that stretch of road shortens overnight. Concrete plans that used to be certain turn into a maybe or we'll see, or let's just play it by ear. Sometimes they won't even commit to anything unless it's happening the same day. It's the relationship version of driving through heavy fog. You can still move forward, but you can't see far enough ahead to relax. But this isn't necessarily the big predictor yet. That comes with the language shift. It's when we should go to that thing in October quietly becomes, might be busy then. Or when the yeah, let's do it turns into let's play it by ear. And if you watch closely, you'll see it in their behavior too. They'll cancel plans that are farther out and they'll still say yes to spontaneous, like low prep stuff. But they'll avoid anything that locks them in. There'll be no deposits and no tickets, nothing that overlaps with family or creates a sense of obligation. That is the real meaning of the fog card. It's not just that the view ahead is unclear, it's that they've stopped looking ahead at all. So why does this make them shut down? Because avoidants lower the future to reduce attachment pressure. When the calendar gets foggy, it's not random. It's best to view it as a quiet form of emotional prep work. They're pre-processing an exit and stepping out of the relationship in their mind long before they physically do. Let's move on to one of my favorite cards, the Temperance. Here we have an angel carefully regulating water between 2 golden chalices. It's best to think of this card the way you might think of Libras. Being a Libra myself, I'm obsessed with balance and keeping with the scales just right. Avoidants are kind of similar because they fall into a principle called homeostatic balance, which is the tendency to maintain a steady internal emotional temperature by cooling things down when they start to feel too warm or too intimate. So for example, if the connection with you spikes into a deep vulnerability, they instinctively reach for the chalice and start pouring out some of that closeness, and just enough to bring the temperature back to what feels safe for them. So for example, if the connection with you spikes into deep vulnerability, they instinctively reach for the chalice and start pouring out some of that closeness, just enough to bring the temperature back to what feels safe for them. In this video, I talk a little bit about the concept called the emotional thermostat when it comes to avoidance. So basically, I argue that every avoidant comes equipped with their own thermostat, so that when the relationship temperature rises, when there's too much connection, too much safety, too much ease, they don't linger in it. They just adjust. And to them, adjustment often means turning the dial down. Now, this shouldn't come as a shock to anyone, but in their mind, sustained emotional warmth equals vulnerability risk. Too much warmth can feel like losing independence, so they cool things off before they overheat. So what does that look like in real time? You'll often see them pull away or go silent right after an affectionate high point. They'll add light conflict or teasing to create space, and they'll suggest solo time right after a moment of deep closeness. Let's move on to card 4, the Tower. This card is fun. You have a tall tower standing against a dark sky. Lightning forks down and strikes the highest point. Keep that in mind because we're going to come back to that later. This whole card is centered around the idea of anticipatory rejection, which is the tendency to withdraw in advance of potential abandonment, even if there's no real threat. This is a protective strategy rooted in attachment anxiety within the avoidance framework. Remember the lightning from the tarot card? In their mind, that strike is inevitable. So rather than risk being hit, they're going to leap from the tower before it even happens. The problem is the lightning storm that they have built in their mind is often imaginary, but once they've pictured it, the jump feels like survival. This is going to be a really weird metaphor, but bear with me here. Avoidants are like prairie dogs. Just picture this for a moment. You have a prairie dog standing in the sun. Maybe it's nibbling on the grass with its friends. Everything looks peaceful until it suddenly freezes, pops its head up, and scans the horizon. Sometimes there's a real predator, but just as often it's reacting to a shadow or a gust of wind, or nothing at all. And if it thinks it sees danger, it bolts underground before anything gets close. And that's exactly how avoidants operate after a deep moment of connection. They're instinctively scanning for threats. Sometimes those threats are real, sometimes they're imagined. The thing that's key though, they retreat before you have the chance to strike first. Survival over connection every single time. Here are some of the signs that you'll want to pay attention to. And once again, if there's a drop in warmth right after you express strong affection, that's a sign. They'll pull back after intimate conversation. There's a sudden busyness or solo time following a shared high point. Remember, for the avoidant, the lightning hitting the tower doesn't always have to be real. In fact, most of the time it isn't. And that's the trick. Most people make the mistake of immediately rushing in to reassure them, to convince them that there's no storm. And by doing that, you're actually confirming their fears. They'll think, "Why are you working so hard to calm me down? There must be something really wrong here." The counterintuitive move is to let the imagined storm pass on its own. Don't chase them back inside the tower. Give them space to poke their head out again to see if the danger that they thought was coming never arrived. That's when they're most likely to re-engage on their terms. But we're getting off topic here. Let's move on to the 5th card, the Chariot. This card is simple. It's a chariot. Again, not too much to explain here. You have a guy pulling a chariot. But it's what this chariot represents that makes this card interesting. Have you ever heard of the self-concept realignment theory? It's just a fancy way of saying this. You start changing the picture of who you are to fit the life that you think is coming. For avoidance, that means they begin seeing themselves as single long before they actually are. It's like rehearsing a play in your head, practicing the lines, setting the stage, getting used to the role before the curtains even go up. They imagine new routines and a future where you're not there. And that's what the chariot represents. A driver already facing the road ahead, even if the wheels haven't started turning yet. Notice how similar this is to anticipatory rejection? If you recall, anticipatory rejection is about jumping from the tower to avoid being struck. It's fueled by a fear of what might happen in the moment. It's reactive. The lightning appears, real or imagined, and they bolt to protect themselves. Self-concept realignment, on the other hand, is quieter and more deliberate. It's not about dodging a sudden strike, it's about slowly steering their identity toward a different future. They're not running from danger, they're rehearsing for a new life. By the time the chariot starts moving, the emotional goodbye has already happened in their mind. It's complicated, I know. So, to make it a little easier, I've created a list of all the behavioral cues you'll need to watch out for. Talking about my plans instead of talking about our plans. booking solo trips or committing activities that you're not a part of, downplaying the seriousness of the relationship in the conversation, reconnecting with old friends or social circles that you've never even been introduced to, and making lifestyle changes that don't involve you, new hobbies or routines or schedules that run parallel to yours instead of with them, increasing privacy around their phone, schedule, or future plans as if creating a separate life lane that you're not in. Once their internal narrative shifts, persuasion rarely works. You can only reason back into the future that they've already started rehearsing in their mind. By this point, they've already tried on the single me identity, and it fits just enough that no amount of convincing will make them hang it back in the closet. The most powerful thing you can do isn't to chase, plead, or prove your worth. It's to make sure that your own identity stays strong and intact. Keep your routines and keep your passions still alive. Make sure you're staying connected to the people and the places that make you feel most like yourself. When you do this, you prevent their solo future from becoming the only reality in the room. You're not standing there empty-handed waiting to be chosen. You're holding on to a life that's already full. And sometimes that strength and self-possession is the only thing that makes them question the direction their chariot is heading. But here's the truth. You can't stop an avoidant from running, but you can make them realize that they're the ones leaving something worth staying for.